Good day, everyone. Today, we'll be learning about one of the most essential components of any cell, the plasma membrane. This membrane is like the cell's gatekeeper, protecting the cell, deciding what enters and exits, and allowing the cell to interact with its environment. Essentially, it helps the cell maintain homeostasis. This means a state of balance that is vital for cellular function. The plasma membrane plays such a crucial role in keeping the cell protected from harmful substances while also allowing it to communicate with the external environment. So, why is it so important? Well, it's essential for everything from protecting the cell to helping it respond to signals from other cells, and it plays a massive role in keeping the cell functioning properly. Let's start by defining what the plasma membrane actually is. The plasma membrane is the outermost boundary of the cell. It's a flexible, semi-permeable barrier that surrounds the entire cell, separating the inside of the cell from the external environment. In other words, it acts like the border between the cell's internal world and everything outside of it. What's really cool is that this plasma membrane is found not just in eukaryotic cells like plants and animals, but also in prokaryotic cells such as the bacteria. This means the plasma membrane is fundamental to all the living organisms, no matter how simple or complex they are. This boundary is crucial because it ensures that only the right materials pass in and out, maintaining the cell's internal conditions and allowing the cell to communicate with its environment. In fact, everything the cell needs to survive, nutrients, gases, and waste products, must cross this barrier. Without the plasma membrane, the cell wouldn't be able to take in nutrients or remove waste. It also wouldn't be able to detect changes in its environment and respond to them. Now let's dig into how the plasma membrane is built, starting with its basic structure. The plasma membrane is made up of a lipid bilayer. This means it's composed of two layers of phospholipids. Here's the interesting part. Phospholipids have two parts: hydrophilic heads, which love water, and hydrophobic tails, which are afraid of water. The hydrophilic heads face outwards toward the watery environment outside the cell and inside the cell, while the hydrophobic tails tuck inwards away from water. This arrangement naturally forms a bilayer, a double layer of phospholipids that creates a barrier to protect the cell. But it's not just lipids in the membrane. There are also proteins embedded in this lipid bilayer. There are two types of proteins you need to know about. Number one is the peripheral proteins. These are found on the surface of the membrane, either on the inside or outside. These proteins help with things like signaling and cell recognition. For example, there are receptor proteins that detect signals from the outside, like hormones, and trigger a response inside the cell. The other one is the integral proteins. They span across the membrane, going through it from one side to another. These proteins are involved in processes like transporting materials in and out of the cell, cell communication, and even enzyme activity. The plasma membrane also contains cholesterol molecules, which are scattered throughout the bilayer. Cholesterol helps maintain the fluidity of the membrane. Think of it as a stabilizer. It prevents the membrane from becoming too rigid or too fluid, which is important for keeping it functional in varying temperatures. So we've covered the structure. Now let's take a look at the crucial functions of the plasma membrane. Number one is selective permeability. One of the most important jobs of the plasma membrane is regulating what enters and exits the cell. This is known as selective permeability. The membrane allows some molecules to pass through easily, like small, nonpolar molecules such as oxygen and carbon dioxide. These molecules can slip right through the lipid bilayer, but larger or charged molecules like glucose or ions need help from membrane proteins to get in. There are different ways substances can move across the plasma membrane. Number one is through simple diffusion. This is when molecules move from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. For example, oxygen diffuses into a cell and carbon dioxide diffuses out. The next one is facilitated diffusion. Some molecules like glucose are too big to pass through the lipid bilayer easily. Instead, they pass through membrane proteins that act like channels or carriers to help them cross. The last one is through active transport. This requires energy. The cell uses ATP to move molecules against their concentration gradient, like the sodium-potassium pump, which helps maintain the proper balance of sodium and potassium ions in and out of the cell. The plasma membrane is also involved in processes like endocytosis, which means when the cell engulfs particles or liquids from the outside, and exocytosis, when the cell expels waste or secreted materials. Another major role of plasma membrane is in cell signaling. The membrane contains receptors, which are proteins that can detect signals from outside the cell, like hormones, growth factors, or other chemical signals. When the signals bind to the receptor proteins, they trigger a series of changes inside the cell, influencing how the cell behaves. This is known as signal transduction. And lastly, the plasma membrane also helps the cell recognize and interact with other cells. There are glycoproteins and glycolipids on the surface of the membrane that act like name tags for the cell. These molecules have carbohydrate chains that help identify the cell, so the immune system knows which cells belong and which ones are foreign invaders like bacteria. Now let's talk about the fluid mosaic model, which is the most widely accepted model for understanding the plasma membrane. Okay. The term fluid refers to the fact that the membrane is flexible and its components are always moving. The term mosaic refers to the fact that the membrane is made up of a variety of components such as lipids, proteins, and cholesterol that all come together to create a dynamic structure. This fluidity allows the membrane to adjust and respond to changes in the cell's environment, ensuring the cell stays functional no matter what's going on around it. In summary, the plasma membrane is essential for maintaining homeostasis, keeping the inside of the cell stable and balanced. Its selective permeability ensures that harmful substances stay out while allowing nutrients, gases, and other essential molecules in. The membrane also plays a key role in cell communication and protection. Without the plasma membrane, cells couldn't function properly and living organisms wouldn't be able to survive. So, to wrap up, we've learned that the plasma membrane is a dynamic, vital structure that does more than just keep the cell together. It regulates what comes in and out, helps the cell communicate with its environment, and ensures that the cell maintains its internal balance. The plasma membrane is truly the gatekeeper of the cell, and without it, life as we know wouldn't be possible. That's all for today. See you in the next module. Bye bye.